What if we told you that there was a story that linked together different Disney attractions from across the world?
Some of these attractions are brand new and some no longer exist, but this is one of the coolest things Disney has ever created, and it's called
the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, aka S.E.A.
Today, we're sharing with you the complete history of this secret organization and how it ties to Disney parks, cruise line, and experiences around the world.
To understand S.E.A., we have to go back in time to the year 1500. According to the backstory, S.E.A. is a very secretive organization that was founded on August 12th of 1538 at Porto, Paradiso, Italy. This is where the Society headquarters, Fortress Explorations, lived. Some of the early members of S.E.A. that you may know are Leonardo da Vinci and Christopher Columbus. But from the 1500s to the 1900s, S.E.A. grew and grew. It added more explorers, adventurers, scientists, researchers, artists, and more.
S.E.A. is dedicated to the continued exploration of the world.
Now back to where the backstory began. In the 1500s, that same Fortress Explorations headquarters we mentioned opened up as an opening day attraction at Tokyo Disneyland in their Mediterranean harbor area.
In S.E.A.'s eyes, the goal of the attraction was to support the sharing of nautical and scientific knowledge in world exploration. In actuality, it was a walkthrough attraction that challenged guests to solve a series of riddles and puzzles in order to become members of S.E.A. themselves. This entire backstory was spelled out on provided maps, and this was the first time that we as Disney park goers got to see a glimpse of S.E.A.
The Society's influence could also be seen in the nearby Magellan restaurant. This served as the Society's secret meeting place. They had a hidden wine cellar behind a bookcase, and this is going to become a common theme with S.E.A. But for the next 350 years, between the 1500s and the 1800s, S.E.A. was almost completely underground, and we have very few traces of them.
But in 1850, they reappeared thanks to one of the first main characters in the chronological timeline, Camelia Falco.
She was the daughter of the founders of the Museum of Fantastic Flight located in Porto, Paradiso, in the same location as the Fortress Exploration.
It was the setting for Tokyo Disneyland's version of Soarin', and Camelia inherited the Museum of Fantastic Flight in 1850.
In 1851, she was officially inducted into S.E.A. as the very first woman member of the club. And Camelia has a fascinating backstory. She was a hot air balloon traveler. She was an explorer.
You can see traces of her backstory now at the Tropical Hideaway in Disneyland.
This is where she displayed her expedition paddles.
Her interest in hot air balloon travel led her to develop something called the Dream Flyer glider.
Unfortunately, in 1875, Camelia did pass away, but her spirit lived on in the Museum of Fantastic Flight.
Today, she continues to reside there and invites visitors to take a trip aboard her Dream Flyers, aka Soarin', in Tokyo Disneyland.
Next in the timeline, we meet two new characters. The year is 1870, and Barnabas T. Billion goes on a sea expedition and meets Jason Chandler.
Several years later, Barnabas becomes the owner and president of Big Thunder Mining Co., which is digging up gold from Big Thunder Mountain.
One of his first moves as the president of the company is to move the company's headquarters from Rainbow Ridge, aka Thunder Mountain at Disneyland, to Tumbleweed, aka Thunder Mountain at Disney World. Unfortunately, he starts running into major issues with his mining, and so that's when he reaches out to Jason Chandler, who comes to help.
Despite their best efforts, they continue to run into issues because the spirit of Big Thunder Mountain is very hostile to the miners exploiting its land, and ultimately is filled with accidents and disasters.
Next in the timeline, we meet Captain Mary Oceaneer. She was a sailor and a treasure hunter who had a lot of interest in piracy.
In 1898, she launched the Oceaneer Lab, equipped with equipment for nautical studies and treasure diving.
If that name is familiar, it's because the Oceaneer Labs can be found on some of the Disney Cruise Line ships as the Kids Club, and inside there are so many details that tie back to Mary Oceaneer.
She's also documented to have visited Disney's private island Castaway Cay in the Bahamas, where she recovered a sunken golden sword and buried treasure.
Now, this isn't the last we will hear of Mary because she'll make a reappearance in the mid-1950s. But for now, in 1899, Mary attended a S.E.A. meeting at the Hotel Hightower in New York. This was hosted by S.E.A. member Harrison Hightower III.
Introducing our next character, Harrison Hightower III.
Harrison Hightower III inherited a huge fortune and used that to purchase all sorts of different artifacts that he displayed in his New York mansion.
He was the owner of the Hightower Hotel, and if you've heard that name before, it's because it's featured in Tokyo Disneyland's Tower of Terror.
This was the very first time that Imagineers ditched the Twilight Zone theme for the Tower of Terror and created an entirely new backstory, all themed around S.E.A.
On December 31st, 1899, Harrison threw a New Year's Eve party to show off his latest acquisition.
the cursed Shiriki Atundu statue. This proved to be a very bad idea because when the clock struck midnight, the idol came to life and Harrison Hightower completely disappeared and has not been heard from since.
So in 1911, the New York Preservation Society opened up the Hightower Hotel for tours, which is how you can ride it on Tower of Terror today.
Around the same time, our next character, Lord Henry Mystic, and his pet monkey, Albert, decided to open up their own manor, the Mystic Manor in Hong Kong Disneyland, to show off their own artifacts.
Similar to Hightower, he had acquired these through years and years of explorations.
His most prized possession was his music box, and this ties into the story of the ride as the music box comes to life.
Nearby, he also built the Explorers Club restaurant. This continues his story by showing off additional artifacts and actually pulls from the original Walt Disney World Adventurers Club.
We'll get to that in a minute. You might be familiar with this next character. It's Dr. Albert Falls from the Jungle Cruise. He founded the Jungle Navigation Company in the year 1911.
After many years of exploring, he wanted to improve shipping for other explorers in remote areas. More on him in a minute.
Let's jump back to the Adventurers Club because in 1937, Meriwether Pleasure founded Pleasure Island, which was at downtown Disney.
He opened up a clubhouse that contained artifacts from his explorations around the world, and he called it the Adventurers Club.
Now, the Adventurers Club actually opened up in 1989. It didn't contain any traces of S.E.A. In fact, while it was open, Disney later backtracked and made Meriwether Pleasure one of the members of S.E.A. But what it really did is lay the groundwork for so many of the references and tributes we see in the parks today.
Now let's talk about another member of S.E.A. and a member of the Adventurers Club, Camelia Perkins.
Now, the date of this is unknown, but we can assume it's around the same time as when Meriwether Pleasure opened up the Adventurers Club. She sent a letter to Drami Kaimi of Olani.
In this letter, we learned about some of the less honorable members of the club, called the Pillagers Brigade.
And who was the leader of the Pillagers Brigade? Harrison Hightower III, the one who stole that cursed idol.
Now back to Dr. Albert Falls. In 1939, he disappears.
And his granddaughter, Alberta Falls, succeeds him.
She took over the Jungle Navigation Company and opened it up to tourists to take them around the rivers.
She also opened up the old Skipper Canteen to guests. And the Skipper Canteen contains a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf.
This is where her grandfather used to entertain other members of S.E.A.
Inside, you can find fezzes belonging to Dr. Albert Falls, to Henry Mystic, to Albert the Monkey, to Mary Oceaneer, to Meriwether Pleasure, and more.
There are also display cases of maps and drawings of legendary creatures by Mary Oceaneer, Jason Chandler, and a character we'll talk about shortly, Captain Bro.
Now, next on our timeline, we meet our next character, and if you've seen Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, you might be familiar with this person. His name is Jock Lindsay.
He was a freelance pilot who regularly transported Indiana Jones, and he pops up in the year 1940.
As Jock Lindsay was flying over the Sunshine State, searching for the elusive Fountain of Youth, he decided he wanted to actually settle down in a nice waterfront property.
This was where he created a bar inside of his hangar called Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar that you might be familiar with from Disney Springs.
He would frequently invite his globe-trotting friends to visit him and his bar, and behind they would leave artifacts, photos, and more.
Inside of his bar, you can find a passport for another Adventurers Club member, Samantha Sterling.
You can also find another opening night photo with many members of the Adventurers Club and several members from S.E.A.
Now back to Captain Mary Oceaneer. In 1955, she unfortunately got caught in a hurricane.
Her and her ship were launched into the seaside port of Placid Palms. Her ship was completely severed in half. Her treasure and all of her equipment went everywhere.
This sent many of her large artifacts from recent voyages into the trees.
And you can see these artifacts on Misadventure Falls, which is one of the newer attractions at Typhoon Lagoon.
Mary took this as the opportunity to officially retire. While these are the main characters and the primary storyline of S.E.A., there are truly hundreds of other references and characters built throughout the parks.
Let's go through just a few more.
Remember Captain Bro? He was a S.E.A. affiliate who docked his ship, the Hyperion, at Disneyland Paris.
Now, the Hyperion was actually used to help create a map of the Mekong River for S.E.A. member Jason Chandler. Remember, he helped out Barnabas T. Bellion as well.
Also in Disneyland Paris is the Explorers Club restaurant, which served as a place for them to meet, and in it you can see a sea patch.
This is very similar to the Adventurers Club, but oddly that sea patch was removed and no one really knows why. At Walt Disney World, if you go to the Abracadabra on the boardwalk, there is an incredible backstory all about magicians disappearing.
There you can also find a tribute to S.E.A. with one of the S.E.A. fezzes, which indicates that one of the magicians was part of the club.
Also at Walt Disney World, you can find a tribute to S.E.A. at the UK Kidcot station.
The area is themed after the Royal Adventurers Society, and you can see a S.E.A. handbook.
At Disneyland, we expand the storyline of Jungle Cruise a little little bit more with Dr. Albert Falls, and we meet a new character.
That character is Dr. Kan Chunsuke.
In the queue for the ride, you can see many shipping crates with different characters' names on them, including Henry Mystic and Harrison Hightower. You can also see some of these tributes at the Disney World Jungle Cruise.
Trader Sam's at Disneyland also contains references to Albert Falls, Hightower, and Merriweather Pleasure.
And Disneyland has huge ties to Jason Chandler. At one point, he was the SEA president and he founded Discovery Bay. This is a lost and unbuilt land of Disneyland that inspired Discoveryland at Disneyland Paris and has an incredible backstory. Let us know if you want us to cover that.
This story is truly the most expansive and intricate that Disney has ever come up with.
And there is more to come on this story as Disney continues adding SEA tributes to their rides, their parks, their cruise line across the world. They're also creating a SEA television show, and searching for all of the hidden details is one of our absolute favorite things to do in Disney.
We were lucky enough to receive official SEA patches from a Disney Imagineer,
and we really consider ourselves unofficial members of SEA because we're so fascinated by this backstory. Thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel.
We can't wait to dive more into this crazy backstory, so let us know what details we should focus on next.